Good afternoon. This is Devar Torah on Parshas Ekev. It's the third parsha in Sefer Devarim, the last five books of Moses, as they're called, Mashim, five Mashim, and I will be making some comments on that question of the five Mashim a little later. In any event, the Parshas Ekev is an interesting combination of promising of what will happen if the Jewish people follow all of Hashem's commandments, don't get ensnared by idol worship or other things, and how well they'll be protected and how Hashem will love us and care for us. It also is a warning that there's also in there a warning about what happens when we enter the land, and don't do that. And then also has a major recap of the events from the giving of the Torah on Sinai through the first time Moshe was up there for 40 days getting the rest of the Torah, the next 40 days when he had to beg forgiveness from Egel Zahav, and finally the third 40 days, which he came down, started Rosh Chodesh El and ended on Yom Kippur. And first goes for rewards for if you do it, and also confidence that just like Hashem uprooted Egypt through its things, there will also, when the Jewish people have to go against the 31 nations, will be done gradually, so the land won't be taken over by wild animals, and we cause all of the mitzvahs all of the things he protected us against. But before that, he also says that is what is the nature of the land, which I'll be describing in more detail. And he also wants what's going to happen if you get all those houses you didn't do and all the flocks you're capturing from the nations when you get there. You become overconfident and forget who brought you out. And then he recounts all the miracles that happened in the desert that protected us during that wilderness. And he says not to be worried. They don't worship idols. And, we're going to realize that we first triumph only because of Hashem's miracles, but later on, um, because of all their sins, they're being forced out of the land, not because of the righteousness of the Jewish people. And he points that out by showing, don't get overconfident. Don't forget who's going to give you all this, because look what you did after Sinai and how you learned to worship the Egel Zahav and all the other places you tested Hashem. In fact, it's 10 times mentioned in Pirkei Avos. And describes the second tablets and the role of Levi, and this was emphasizing following Hashem's ways. And again, reminding what happened in the desert and all our various miracles and rebellions. And it's a special, different type of land, not where the water flows like the Nile, but it comes from Hashem. If we keep his promises, keep his mitzvahs, all will be well. And not to worry about nations being stronger because Hashem will give victory. Now, this is interesting mixture, but what I would like to focus on is a few verses that talks about the nature of the land you're going to. And that in itself is very important. And what is that land? How does he describe it? This is chapter 8, the Pesukim verses 7 through 9, which says, Ki Hashem Elokecha Levia El Eretz Tova, Eretz Nachlas, Mayim, Naya, Yanas, Tehom, Yotzim, Bebekia, Bahar, and Eretz Kita, Sarei, Geffen, Teina, Rimon, Eretz, Zayed, Veshemen, and Devash, Eretz Asher Lo, Mesukol Note, Tokobad Lechem, Ol Tosar, Kol Masha Eretz, Avlanim, Bawazel, and Maharin Kutsav Nocheshes. Translates God your Lord is bringing you to a good land, a land flowing with streams and underground flowing streams, underground springs, gushing out in the valley. It's describing 3 words for that. It's a land of wheat, barley, grapes, figs, and pomegranate, a land of oil, olives, and honey dates. Honey being that of tamarim, not honey of bees. It's a land where you will not eat rationed bread, and you will not lack anything. A land whose stones are iron, whose mountains you will quarry copper. There's a number of questions that can be asked on this parsha, on these pasukim. First of all, why is there 3 different mentions of 3 different bodies of water, 3 different forms of water flowing? Why does it mention what is the deepest significance of the 7 species that we, by the way, those we say a special bracha or achrona blessing, thanks to Hashem, after we eat, which is the Alamik Yub series of brachas. And what is it, all this talk, excuse me, that you will, that the stones are like iron, from Mount quarry copper? What is going on here? And what I'd like to discuss is I would like to discuss the commentary of of Shimshon Matzvapoli, famous Rav and Kabbalist from the 1600s. He died 1648 in the Kalmaniki uprising in the Ukraine. And he asked why they have different 3 Gimel Lishanot for water, Nahal, Lee, streams, and iron wells, Kumot, water that comes gushing out. Why did he Gimel Lishanot? Because it's telling us the 3 main fundamentals of the Torah, which would be Mikra, which would be the Bible, the 5 books of Moses. The second one is Mishnah. The third one is Gemara. It's also telling us another important thing, that there's an illusion. It's also the Torah, Nevi'ah, and Kosuvim. The Torah, the 5 books. The Nevi'im, the prophets, and Kesuvim, the writing like Psalms, in the book of Daniel, and the 5 Megillot, etc. Now, there's a further allusion, not only to the Torah, but to mitzvahs, because he also explains that the words chita v'shesara, sarah, the grain, wheat, and all of that, is talking about wheat and barley. It's talking about, it's gematria. That's where you take the Hebrew letters, and if you take the Hebrew letters of chita, v'sarei, wheat and barley, and the barley, and you add the Hebrew letters, you'll get a gematria of 613. Each Hebrew letter has a value, and that's the gematria. And Taryag 613 is the Um, it's the number of mitzvahs. And where it says chiton, sarai, v'gefen, v'taina, v'rimoni, those first five species, the wheat, the barley, the grapes, the dates, and the pomegranates, those are all against, that's a representation on a deeper level of the five books of the Chumash. But that leaves a question. There's a question there. What about Zion, Shem, and Devash? That's another two. And if you get to count those, you got seven. But isn't there just five books of the Torah? So what he comes to explain is, what are they? The seven books of the Torah. And this is very, very deep, as he puts it. I'm just going to give a very brief explanation of this. And what is this explanation? If you look in the middle of the book of Sefer Bamidbar, or numbers in English, there's two inverted nuns that separate two pasukim. Now, these have many meanings. I'm only going to briefly go through one, which I think is apropos here, and it ties it very nicely. He doesn't say this, but I want to connect it to the portion. Another way is that these two verses, that these two extra books, there were two pasukim. And then, so the first, Sefer the Bamidbar, there's the fourth book. Those two pasukim in the fifth book, and the rest of the Sefer Bamidbar is the sixth book, and the Devarim, the one we're in, is the seventh. Now, what came before and after those two pasukim of the world that we actually live in, where the sins of the spies did occur? We delayed 40 years. There was also some before that, the Eagles to have. But those two pasukim are telling us that if we had not committed to those sins, it's talking about a whole alternate reality where we would have gone in either the first year after we came out of Egypt, at latest the second, and also including that, even in the 40th year, where if Moshe had spoken the rock instead of broken it, Moshe would have come in, we would have all stayed at the level above Adam Rishon. There would have been no Yetzer Hara, no Hate. And that's really apropos here because the various midrash, including the Tanakh, emphasize the fact that here is the potential. We blew it at the end of the first time with the sin of the Eagles Hab, which is golden calf, which is warning us not to be overconfident and not to do it again. And we must cleave to Hashem. And therefore, it's very relevant to show what could have been, what was, what could have been, and ultimately on a deeper level, telling us what will be at the time of Zman Mashiach, when it will be the final redemption. And um, it's telling us the next pasuk, which is saying that talking about the stones and and like stones of iron, and digging out the copper, is on a deeper level, um, telling us, as explains in Gemara and Tainus, and that all of the Talmud Chachamim, every Talmud Chachamim is not kasher like Basel, and ain't a Talmud Chachamim hard as rock. It's what is explaining here when it says the eretz that of Avanim, that there's Avanim Basel. What is it telling us? It's telling us something very important. And this is what's called a drash, where you take an expression and extend it. And as Rashi explains, we says avanim, which is stones. But you shouldn't read that. You should read, that's Aleph base Nun Vav Hey. You should rearrange the letters and get Boneh, and the Talmud could come and build the land, and even famous statement, but even more than that, Talmud could come and again Makayim in the Olam with its building, and hopefully will soon merit the final redemption, as we're living in very challenging times, and may we merit that final redemption soon. Have a good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.